Manson Family murders. Leader. He never looked important. On most days, he blended into the sidewalks of California like anyone else drifting through the late 60s. Thin frame, unremarkable clothes, a face that didn't ask to be remembered. People passed him without turning their heads, without knowing they would later swear they had always noticed him. He spoke softly at first, not to crowds, to individuals, one at a time. He asked questions that felt harmless. Where are you from? What do you want? Who hurt you? He listened closely, nodding, letting silence stretch just long enough to feel meaningful. When he answered, it was never direct. He didn't give solutions. He gave reflections. You're not broken, he said. They just don't see you. You're awake. Most people aren't. The words landed gently. They stayed. He didn't claim power. He rejected it openly. He laughed when people suggested he was special. That refusal made him more convincing. It felt honest. It felt rare. He talked about freedom, about escaping a world that lied constantly. He spoke of love without rules, of living without fear, of cutting away the noise of society. There was no anger in his voice when he spoke about the world outside. Just disappointment, like a parent describing a child who never learned. People leaned closer when he spoke, not because he was loud, because he wasn't. He remembered names, details, small things others forgot. He repeated them later, days or weeks after hearing them. It felt impossible. It felt intentional. When someone challenged him, he didn't argue. He smiled. He turned the question back on them. Why do you need an answer? Why does it bother you? The challenger often left confused, unsure what they had even tried to say. He sang sometimes, simple songs, repetitive melodies, nothing polished, nothing impressive, but people listened anyway. The songs felt unfinished, like they were waiting for the listener to complete them. He told stories without endings. He let people fill in the gaps themselves. That was how it started. No speeches, no commands, no promises of violence or chaos, just a man who made others feel chosen, seen, different from the rest of the world. He didn't pull people in. He let them walk toward him. At night, when conversations slowed and the world grew quiet, he spoke about truth. About how society trained people to obey. About how fear was manufactured and sold. About how love had been turned into a transaction. He said the same ideas again and again, but never the same way twice. The repetition slipped past resistance. It felt like discovery, not instruction. If someone hesitated, he didn't push. He waited. Time did the work for him. Soon, people began repeating his words back to him, not as quotes, as beliefs, as realizations they thought were their own. That was when he knew. He didn't need to convince them anymore. They were already listening, even when he wasn't speaking. The man who looked ordinary had learned something dangerous. If you tell someone they are special long enough, they will do almost anything to protect that feeling. Even silence began to feel heavy around him. When he stopped talking, others rushed to fill the space. They wanted his approval, his smile, his calm nod. He rarely said, "Do this." He didn't have to. By the time anyone thought to ask who he really was, it already felt too late. He had become the center of the room without ever standing in it. And somewhere along the way, the line between who he was and who they believed him to be quietly disappeared. The night air stayed warm, cars passed, music drifted from open windows. Life continued, unaware that something small and patient had begun to grow. Not a movement yet, Just a voice. Low, steady, waiting. Group. They arrived one by one. Not all at once, not with intention. Some came because they had nowhere else to go. Others because they were curious. A few because they were running from something they didn't want to name out loud. They stayed longer than they planned. At first it felt temporary. A place to sleep, a conversation that went on late into the night. Someone who listened without interrupting. No pressure, no schedule, no rules written down. That absence of structure felt like freedom. They shared food, whatever there was, sometimes nothing. No one complained. Hunger became part of the routine, and routine became comfort. It stripped days of urgency. Time slowed. Mornings blended into afternoons. Nights stretched. He didn't assign roles. People found them on their own. Someone cooked, someone cleaned, someone watched the road, someone sang, someone listened. When tasks went undone, no one was blamed. Responsibility floated. It belonged to everyone and no one. That made it hard to leave. Leaving felt like breaking something unspoken. They talked constantly about music, about the world, about how broken everything was outside. He didn't dominate these conversations. He drifted through them, adding a sentence here, a question there, enough to redirect without taking control. If someone missed home, he didn't mock them. He asked what home had ever given them. When they answered, he waited. Silence did the rest. New arrivals noticed something quickly. People spoke differently here. They finished each other's sentences. They used the same phrases. They laughed at the same moments. Disagreements were rare, and when they happened, they dissolved fast. No raised voices, no visible tension, just long pauses and soft agreement. It felt peaceful. Too peaceful. Names began to matter less. Stories blurred together. Individual pasts became less important than shared presence. When someone tried to talk about who they used to be, the conversation drifted away naturally, like the group had already moved on. The outside world felt loud by comparison, harsh, demanding. News sounded unreal when it reached them. Politics felt like a performance. Violence felt distant, even when it was close. He framed it all as proof that the world was sick, proof that stepping away was the only sane choice. He didn't say they were better. He implied they were awake. That distinction mattered. They slept close together, not out of necessity, but habit. Privacy faded without discussion. Nothing was hidden because nothing was owned. Objects moved freely. Clothes changed hands. Even memories felt shared. Someone would start a thought. Another would finish it. A third would nod, already knowing where it was going. They stopped asking each other for permission. They started looking to him instead. Not openly, not consciously, just small glances, a pause before speaking, a quick look when uncertainty appeared. He noticed, but he never acknowledged it. Approval came subtly. A smile, a quiet laugh. Sitting next to someone instead of across from them. Attention was currency, and he controlled the supply without appearing to. When someone questioned him, the group reacted before he did. Not aggressively, gently, explaining, reframing, protecting. The questioner often felt embarrassed afterward, unsure why they had spoken at all. Doubt became inconvenient. At night, they sat together and listened as he spoke about connection, about unity, about how the world taught people to fear one another. He said fear was the true prison. He said love was obedience without force. That line stayed with them. They repeated it later, as if it had come from somewhere else. Over time, people stopped making plans that didn't include the group. Phone calls went unanswered. Letters were forgotten. Families became abstract concepts, talked about in past tense. When someone left for a few hours, the return felt like relief. The outside air clung to them like a smell that needed to fade. They began to use we more than I. It happened quietly. No announcement, no decision, just habit. The group moved together, ate together, slept together, thought together. When one person felt anxious, others noticed before words were spoken. They soothed each other with phrases they all recognized. The voice they followed had become internal. He no longer needed to speak as much. Sometimes he said nothing for hours. The group filled the silence with discussions about what he meant, what he would say if he were talking. They interpreted pauses like scripture. Meaning multiplied in absence. Someone once asked him what would happen if he disappeared. He smiled, said nothing. The question lingered longer than the answer would have. They didn't need him every moment anymore. They needed what he had already placed inside them. And that was more dangerous. The group was no longer a collection of people. It was a single shape, constantly adjusting, closing gaps, pulling tighter when threatened. From the outside, it still looked fragile, temporary, easy to break apart. From the inside, it felt inevitable, like gravity, like something that had always been there, waiting for them to find it. They didn't know when they crossed the line, only that turning back no longer felt possible. And somewhere beyond the edge of their shared circle, the rest of the world continued moving, unaware that a quiet separation had already taken place. Not violent, not dramatic, just complete. Persuasion. He changed the rhythm slowly. There was no announcement when it happened, no moment anyone could point to later and say, "This is where it turned." It felt more like a shift in weather. The same air, slightly heavier. The same voices, just a little quieter. He began telling stories. Not lectures, stories that wandered, stories without clear morals. He talked about the world ending, but never as a threat, more like an inevitability, something natural, something overdue. He said society was built on lies, stacked carefully enough to look like truth, that rules existed only to protect those who wrote them. That fear was the only language governments truly understood. He never said when things would change. That made the idea easier to accept. He spoke about violence the way someone might speak about storms. Unfortunate. Sometimes necessary. Never personal. He didn't glorify it. He didn't condemn it either. He treated it as part of the landscape. When someone asked if he believed people were good or evil, he laughed softly. He said those were words invented to simplify control. He said people were tools shaped by the world they lived in. And tools could be used. The group listened. They always listened. He spoke about love often, about how real love meant removing fear completely, about how hesitation was learned behavior, about how society trained people to feel guilty for following instinct. He said guilt was artificial. That line settled deeply. When someone hesitated before acting, he noticed. He never stopped them. He simply asked why they were afraid. The question lingered longer than the moment itself. Soon, hesitation felt like weakness. He reframed obedience as clarity, as freedom from confusion. If you trusted completely, you didn't have to decide anymore. Decision-making, he said, was where pain lived. He never demanded loyalty. He described it as alignment. If someone disagreed, he didn't push back. He asked the group what they thought. They answered for him. They always did. Truth became something agreed upon collectively, not something tested. He blurred the boundary between metaphor and reality deliberately. When he spoke about war, it sounded symbolic. When he spoke about enemies, it sounded philosophical. But the language hardened over time. Us and them appeared more often. Not shouted, whispered. He talked about how the outside world would never understand them, how misunderstanding always came before destruction, how history proved that new ways of thinking were always attacked first. He positioned himself not as a leader, but as a translator. He said he was only explaining what the universe was already saying. That made disagreement feel pointless. When someone questioned a story, he smiled and said, "That's not what matters." He redirected attention to how the story felt, not whether it was true. Emotion replaced verification. Memory followed feeling, not fact. He encouraged repetition, songs, phrases, simple sentences said again and again until they lost their edges, until they felt inevitable. The group began correcting each other gently. When someone used language that didn't fit, another would rephrase it, not as a reprimand, as help. Thoughts became standardized. He spoke late at night, when exhaustion softened resistance, when silence felt heavier, when shadows stretched and the outside world felt distant and unreal. He talked about destiny, but without dates, about roles, but without assignments. He left enough space for imagination to do the work. People began imagining themselves as part of something larger, something necessary. He said society would try to stop them eventually, not violently, subtly, with ridicule, with misunderstanding, with attempts to separate them. He framed separation as the real danger. Anyone who left was said to be sleeping again. That word spread quietly. No one wanted to sleep. When someone expressed doubt, the group surrounded them with reassurance, not confrontation. They reminded them how lost they had been before, how calm they felt now, how safe. Doubt became something to be cured, not explored. He encouraged isolation without calling it that. He said outside voices created confusion, that clarity required distance, that too many perspectives diluted truth. Contact with the outside world faded further. The group stopped asking questions that didn't have answers already prepared. He started speaking in absolutes more often, still calmly, still softly, but the language sharpened. Words like must and cannot slipped in unnoticed. By then, it didn't matter. The group trusted him more than they trusted their own memories. He had rewritten those too. He told them they were chosen not by him, but by circumstance, that surviving in a broken world required breaking from it completely. He said the coming change would require commitment. Not yet, but soon. The idea of action entered the space quietly, as a concept, as preparation, as responsibility. He didn't describe what action looked like. He didn't need to. The group began anticipating his needs, finishing his thoughts, interpreting his silences. When he paused, they leaned in. When he spoke, they listened as if the words were already inside them, waiting to be heard. By the time the line between suggestion and command finally dissolved, no one noticed it had ever existed. They weren't being persuaded anymore. They were remembering something they believed they had always known. And somewhere beneath the calm voices and shared smiles, something irreversible settled into place. A readiness, not rushed, not loud, just waiting for the moment when thought would turn into movement. Break. The separation didn't arrive with force. It arrived quietly, disguised as clarity. They began talking about the outside world as if it were already gone. Not destroyed, just irrelevant. A place they no longer belonged to. When someone mentioned family, the room stayed calm, but the conversation drifted away quickly, like a reflex. He encouraged this without instruction. He spoke about how society punished those who refused to conform, how it labeled difference as danger, how it isolated people who threatened its structure. He said rejection was proof, not failure. The group listened. They had already felt the distance growing. When someone left for a day or two, the return felt awkward. Conversations stalled. Familiar phrases didn't land the same way. The outside world clung to them, not physically, but in tone, in hesitation. It took time for that to fade. They began avoiding those trips. Contact with outsiders became tense, short, transactional. Anyone who questioned the group's way of living was seen as confused at best, hostile at worst. No one argued with them. There was nothing to argue. Understanding, they believed, was impossible from the outside. He framed it as protection. He said the world would try to pull them apart, not because it cared, but because it feared losing control. He warned that doubt could be planted by others, quietly, patiently. They learned to recognize it. A raised eyebrow, a skeptical tone, a question that felt too sharp. These were signs, signals. He never told them to cut ties. He didn't have to. People stopped calling home, stopped writing back. Birthdays passed unnoticed. News from outside sounded distorted, like it came from another time. Inside the group, everything felt immediate, real, necessary. They developed shared routines, shared language, shared reactions. Laughter came at the same moments. Silence fell together. When one person grew uneasy, others closed in, reassuring, steady. The group tightened. He spoke more about enemies now, still not naming them, just describing forces, systems, ideas that had to be confronted eventually. He said confrontation didn't always look like conflict. Sometimes it looked like refusal, sometimes like action. He said the world wouldn't let them exist peacefully forever. That idea settled slowly. When tension appeared within the group, he reframed it. Conflict, he said, was residue from the outside world, old habits resurfacing, conditioning. He urged patience, trust. Those who struggled were given more attention, more reassurance, more proximity. Distance, he said, created confusion. Leaving was framed as abandonment. Not of him, of the group. When someone finally did leave for good, the reaction was calm. No anger, no shouting, just quiet disappointment. The name was spoken less, then not at all. They went back to sleep, someone said once. No one disagreed. The absence felt like proof. Proof that separation was dangerous. Proof that only the group offered safety. Proof that the outside world consumed people who tried to return to it. He let fear exist without naming it. He spoke about loyalty in indirect ways, about standing firm, about not wavering when the world tried to pull them apart. He said unity was survival. He said fragmentation led to destruction. By now, the group didn't need reminders. They moved as one, thought as one, reacted as one. Individual doubt dissolved quickly, absorbed by shared certainty. When he spoke, it wasn't instruction anymore. It was confirmation. The final break came not with a dramatic moment, but with acceptance, the quiet realization that there was no life waiting for them outside this circle. No understanding, no refuge, only noise, only confusion. The group had chosen clarity. They had chosen him, and in doing so, they had already crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The outside world didn't disappear, but it stopped mattering, and that was enough. Court. The room was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. Not the chosen silence of late nights and shared understanding. This was enforced, structured, heavy with expectation. People sat in rows, separated by space that meant something again. He was there, but the setting had changed him. Not physically. He looked much the same. Calm, present, almost amused at moments. But the voice that once drifted freely now echoed against walls that did not respond. The world had returned. Others spoke now. Judges, lawyers, witnesses. They used language that felt sharp and incomplete. Words like evidence, responsibility, intent. The group listened, but the meanings didn't land the way they were supposed to. He rarely defended himself directly. He didn't need to. He smiled at the right moments, laughed softly when the room expected fear. When asked direct questions, he answered sideways. Metaphors, half-truths, pauses that stretched too long. Some in the room felt unsettled by him. Others felt drawn in. He spoke as if he were still explaining the world, not answering for it, as if this too was just another misunderstanding, another system trying to define something it couldn't control. He never said he was innocent. He never said he was guilty. He spoke about influence instead, about how people misunderstood connection, about how words were blamed for actions they didn't commit. He positioned himself as separate from what had happened, even while never fully denying his place in it. The group watched closely. Some smiled back at him, some nodded, some stared, unmoving. They dressed alike at times, spoke in the same phrases when cameras turned toward them. Their unity stood out sharply against the rigid order of the courtroom. The world expected remorse. It didn't arrive. Instead, there was performance, calm defiance, a sense that the trial itself was part of the story he had been telling all along. Proof, he seemed to suggest, that the system feared him. The verdict came eventually. It was heavy, final, spoken in language that allowed no metaphor. He was found responsible not for what his hands had done, but for what his words had set in motion. The court treated speech as a weapon. The sentence closed the door, but not completely. Outside the room, reactions split. Many felt relief. Others felt confusion. A few felt anger, not at him, but at the system that had judged him. They spoke of manipulation, of misunderstanding, of persecution. Some said he was a monster. Others said he was misunderstood. A few said he was telling the truth all along. Years passed. He remained behind walls, separated physically from the world he once drifted through. But his presence lingered. His words were repeated. His image circulated. His story refused to settle. People still asked how it happened. How ordinary people followed him. How words became action. How silence became consent. No single answer satisfied. Because the most unsettling part was not what he did, or what they did for him. It was how quietly it all began. With listening. With belonging. With the feeling of being seen. And the question that never quite went away, lingered long after the courtroom emptied, long after the voices faded. Was it ever really over, or had it only learned how to speak differently?